Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Monash. Today we're talking about a due diligence mistake that shows up in underwriting all the time. It can be a silent killer of your cash flow. It's the assumption that existing property tax assessments, the number that you see on your tax bill today, is a reliable input for your forward-looking pro forma. In some jurisdictions, it's not. In fact, in certain places, the current tax bill is almost meaningless for a buyer because the act of changing hands triggers a reassessment. And that reassessment is designed to catch up for years, sometimes decades, of artificially low increases under the prior owner. If you don't model that correctly, you can buy a property that looks like it has a healthy debt service ratio, only to discover after closing that your taxes reset upward and your deal has a permanent drag on your returns. Let's break this down and see why it happens, why investors get fooled, and how to underwrite correctly. First, why can the existing tax bill be misleading? Because property tax systems are not necessarily uniform. In one jurisdiction, the assessed value might track market value closely and update frequently. In another, the assessed value might move more slowly, or might be capped, or lag reality for years. Some places have rules that limit annual assessment increases for existing owners and then reset the assessment to the near market value on sale. The seller might have held the asset for a long time, and during that hold period, their assessed value increased at a very limited rate, maybe 1 or 2% tied to inflation. Meanwhile, market values could have doubled. So if the seller is paying taxes on a value that's anchored in the past, you as a buyer are stepping in the present. The tax authority wants its share of the present value, not the past value. And that's where the trap is set. You pull a trailing 12-month income statement, you see the operating expenses, you see the property taxes, you assume normal growth rate, maybe 3% a year. You plug that into the model and the model looks fantastic. Then the reassessment letter arrives and suddenly your taxes jump 20, 30, 50%, sometimes more. The increase is not a one-time event. It becomes the new baseline and every future increase compounds from there. In other words, you didn't just miss a line item, you mispriced the asset. So let's start talking about the mechanics. Most buyers look at one of two things. They look at the assessed value and assume it's a proxy for market value, or they look at the current tax bill and assume that it's durable. Neither is safe in reassessment jurisdictions, because the reassessment is not what the seller paid, it's about what you paid. The purchase price is often the strongest signal of market value, and the assessors know that. In many places, the deed transfer becomes a trigger event. Sometimes it's automatic, sometimes it's discretionary, sometimes it could be delayed by a year, but it's coming. And the motive to catch up is straightforward. If the system has caps for existing owners, the tax base erodes relative to the market, unless there's a mechanism to reset it, and that reset restores the tax base. So what does proper due diligence look like? Step 1 is to assume you cannot trust the current tax bill. Treat it as historic information only, like last year's snow removal cost. Useful as a context, not a forecast. Step 2 is to learn the local rules before you finalize the underwriting. You need to know whether a transfer triggers reassessment, what the lag time is, and whether there are caps for existing owners, whether there are exemptions, or whether improvements would trigger a reassessment. What are the appeal rights? Do they actually work? This is not a time for generic assumptions. It's jurisdiction specific. If you're buying in a market that you don't know deeply, get local expertise, a good property tax consultant, a local attorney who sees these transactions, and a property manager who has lived through reassessments will save you from expensive mistakes. Step 3 is to model taxes on a forward assessment, not the current assessment. There are two practical approaches. One is to estimate the new assessed value as a percentage of your purchase price and then apply the mill rate or the local tax rate to that value. The other is to build a tax projection using comparable reassessments, meaning you look at similar properties that sold recently and see what happened to their assessed values and tax bills after the transfer. Both approaches are better than blindly carrying forward the seller's tax bill. If you can do both, that's even better. If the two methods produce similar outcomes, you have a little bit more confidence in your model. Step 4 is to underwrite conservatively. If you're not sure whether the reassessment will land at 90% of purchase price or 70%, pick the higher number. If it breaks the deal was never as good as it looked. This is capital preservation thinking. You're not in the business of hoping the assessor is generous. Step 5 is to address it in the deal structure and your investor communication. If you're raising capital, you owe your investors transparency. Property taxes are a material operating expense, and if your taxes are likely to reset, let them know. Show your assumptions. If you're buying with a lender, understand that the tax reset can affect escrow requirements and debt coverage. Some lenders will underwrite taxes based on purchase price in those jurisdictions. If yours doesn't, That doesn't mean you should be optimistic. It means you should be prepared. Now, there is one more subtle point here. Sometimes the reassessment doesn't happen immediately. That delay is dangerous because it creates false confidence. You close the deal, everything looks fine for a few months, maybe even a year. Then the reassessment hits, retroactively in some cases, and you get a bill that includes catch-up taxes. If you didn't reserve for that retroactive payment, you're scrambling for cash. So part of your due diligence includes a reserve strategy. If you know a reset is likely, hold back a reserve at closing or during the first year of operations. Yeah, I know it's boring, but it's what works. So the takeaway is simple. In some jurisdictions, the seller's property tax bill is not your property tax bill. It's not a stable input. You're responsible for underwriting the taxes that you're going to pay, not the taxes the seller paid. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.